Hello and welcome to Tech Bits, a new podcast from Atama, transformational technology for the modern workplace. You may have already listened to our sister podcast, The Cube, from Academia the Technology Group, which Atama is a part of. If not, have a search on your chosen podcast platform and hit subscribe, although please bear in mind, The Cube is more education technology focused, whereas on Tech Bits, it's all about business. I'm James Dancer, Technical Director of the group, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about how Apple devices work in the modern workplace, why people want them, how to get them, how to manage them, how to finance them, and ultimately, what to do when they're end of life. And for some reason, we're filming this one, Ryan. Any idea why we're actually filming this? No? You've been quiet? Okay, cool. So we're filming this one, which means if you want to see what we're doing, there will be a link in the podcast description. So feel free to give that a click, and if you're that kind of person that actually wants to see our faces, then absolutely go for it. Right, that's the end of the scripted bit, so onwards into uncharted territory, well, kind of semi-guided by me, I guess, but we'll see how we get on. So, intros. Keith Martin to my left is a technical sales manager at Atama. We have Julian Fern bringing the East London vibe to the table. So
thank you, James.
Yeah, expect some rhyming slang, some jelly deals, and probably some...
Or Lummy Mary Poppins.
Some My Old Man Said Follow the Van at some point as well. And Tom Needham, who is head of sales for Revive IT at Atama, and we'll explain what that is a little bit later. In the room, we also have Ryan from our marketing team to make sure I don't say stuff I'm not supposed to, and we'll see how that goes. Good luck with that, Ryan. And we have Matt and Joe filming as well. So, on to the topics of today. Why Apple in business? Like, why are we talking about this?
So, I think it comes from choice, and it's perhaps starts with the consumer element of choice. A lot of us have these things here. That's an iPhone. For those that don't recognise one.
Or
don't forget this is a podcast, right? So you have to explain the visual stuff.
Keith holds iPhone into the air. So a lot of people have an iPhone, have had an iPhone, seen an iPhone, see people using iPhones. Yep. Apple have done an amazing job at inviting more consumers in to use the technology, and
absolutely,
they come from that mindset. I'm probably going to misquote Steve Jobs here, which is probably not a great thing to do, but I think the gist of what he's saying was that you start with the person that's using something, the technology.
Yeah, it's all about the user, isn't it?
You apply what makes sense from a technology point of view, and there's more to it than we can.
I agree, and also I think we've got people who sort of they're going to work the way they want to, and the Apple ecosystem gives them that opportunity. And I think the other thing we talked about before is empowerment. Empower the employee to make that choice. So they know how they want to work in the environment they work within, but more importantly, how they can go and broaden what they do, and also make smarter business decisions.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's been made easier now by so many different systems moving to the cloud and being web-based. So you're not now quite as restricted by the operating system you're using as you were previously. So if you're a business making a choice on what device to use, you'd be thinking about what do I have to use because of the application suite that I'm using. So now even like finance systems and stuff are in the cloud, you can get to them from any device on a web page, which means employees at a business can actually have pretty free choice about what devices people use. And, we know Apple are popular devices anyway. We literally all have them here around the table. This isn't a setup for this discussion. These are genuinely our devices. But it means you can use things like Apple Handoff. Any of you guys use Handoff at all?
I've done it without realising.
Okay.
I think that's a great application of technology. You can find something on an internet, a URL, or I'm copying some text on my phone, and I go to paste, and it's just automatic. I'm thinking, how am I going to paste this thing? And suddenly it's pasted what I've selected from my phone straight onto my Mac.
Yeah, the first time that happened to me, I didn't even realise it was a feature. I should have done, but I didn't realise it was a feature. And so I was on...
Just thought it was magic.
No, it's weird. I was on Safari on my phone on a web page, and then I was on my Mac, and then the little Safari icon popped up, and it was in a separate place. And I was like, I wonder what that is. I clicked the button, and up comes the web page I was looking at on my phone.
Yeah.
And that scared me to start off with. I was wondering how it happened, but then it's so useful when you're kind of writing an email or you're visiting a web page, or as Keith said, and you're using an iPhone, you can then switch to an iPad, you can then switch from the iPad to the Mac, and everything's pretty seamless. And I think that ultimately is where Apple are really successful, right? It's the suite just works.
Does that not make you more productive, and we talk about sort of get more done? So you talk about stay connected. You mentioned about the cloud and how you and utilize the device in that way. Share ideas, a way we can share content between each other, and how we can collaborate with the Apple ecosystem. And as I said before, get more done. The mobility piece for me is it drives us to be the best we can be, I think, from the quality, because it's easy to use. As you just said there, I didn't know it happened. It happened.
Yeah.
And secondly, we all got our devices out of the box, and guess what? They just worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so on the mobility bit, that's a huge thing for businesses nowadays, because all your stuff's in the cloud, so you want to be able to be mobile. And the way you're going to be mobile is with mobile devices, right? So the fact that Apple have a whole suite of products, mobile devices, as well as notebooks and desktops and things that all just work, it kind of makes sense if you want to engage in the ecosystem. I looked this up actually before the podcast about when the iPad was originally released, and it was April 2010, which is crazy.
I just started working then.
You just started working?
Yeah. I just left school.
Yeah, I'm not going to make a comment on how old I am because I'll look stupid. But yeah, 9 years ago, right? And I don't think I've ever really found a time recently where I've thought this is a new piece of technology. It's just like tablets have always been around, or more specifically, the iPad feels like it's always been around now. And it's so ingrained in how people live their lives. Even you've got kids know how to use iPads from a really young age.
But what it's doing. It's a tactile thing.
Yeah.
This was a big difference from using a computer to using a tablet, was the fact that you had something in your hands that fed back to you visibly, and you could interact with your finger.
Yeah.
You were literally hand to eye interacting with technology, whereas before, again, show my age here, to get anything done on a computer, you'd have to type something in, maybe even code or something like that. And that's, as a father of 3 kids, you see kids using these things, and they are even more innately getting more out of it. And
they just
scary.
get it, don't they? They get it really, really quickly as well.
Yep.
Like, you don't even need to tell them how to use an iPad.
Totally.
They just know.
They just touch the TV screen thinking that it's interactive by mistake.
It's also bad if they get hold of your iPhone as a parent, because then they know how to do everything that's that's
I
on
have
it.
nothing to hide.
But you also look upon how it evolved in the education system. I think early days, people weren't quite sure what the outcome looked like. And would say 9 years on down the line, it's quite commonplace. I think in the workplace, I think it was an executive toy. Yeah. The reality is now, with hundreds of thousands of business apps now being designed on the Apple Store, and how they can actually influence a business decision, how they work, and how their own internal ecosystem operates. I think we've moved on so far over in those 9 years, and probably in the last 2 or 3 years, even further, to a place where the iPad doesn't look out of place in a working environment. It's not a secondary product. A lot of people are using iPad, for example, as their primary device.
Well, it's interesting as well, you say, like, in the education sector. So obviously Atama are part of the academia group, and academia deals with the education sector as well. And so what we see now is schools are going one-to-one with iPads. So, we've been involved ourselves and other guys as well, the hats on projects like that. And so what you're getting now is kids leaving school and then going to secondary school and university, having used one of those devices for pretty much their entire career through school. So if you're a business that then says, right, okay, go and sit over there in that corner with that desktop PC, 1, you're behind them, which is a bad thing. 2, you're not going to get the right kind of employees that you want, which are good employees who will want to naturally use the technology they're used to and the technology that makes them the most productive. But it's interesting because previously education kind of used to follow business, right? So if you remember 10, 15 years ago, business would be on the cutting edge of enterprise, and they'd be taking on all the new technology, and then the education sector would be not playing catch up, but I don't think the adoption was as quick as it was in business. And now it's almost the other way around. So we'll go into a school and all the kids will have an iPad.
Totally. The phrase millennials I don't particularly like.
It's Generation Z. We've been past millennials. Yeah, absolutely. Millennials 2000. We're now Generation Z.
I was going to say, if you're going to talk bad about millennials, I technically count as one by
okay. Well, I'm not going to talk bad about anyone, but I think it's whatever generation it is, they're using the technology they grow up with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
and I think that you absolutely hit the nail on the head. If a business is thinking, well, I'm going to give you this thing to use, so therefore you will use that, you're wasting your time. A quick example I'll kind of give around that is that in the past, when I've talked about technology, People find a way, like in Jurassic Park, life finds a way. People find...
that really the reference you're going to use?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with it.
Okay.
Yeah,
1974, thank you.
Re-release. The main thing is people will find a way to use whatever is they can use to do the thing they want to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can't stop that. As much as you might think you'd like to, and as much as an IT department might think, I want to control what people do, the more you kind of put a grip on something, the more people will find a different way to do things. And I had this exact conversation with IT director this very week.
Okay.
Same kind of content, same kind of discussion. And it's a realization for that IT director now that's a real thing. But we should be telling more people that that's the way it is. I guess
yeah, and there's a big thing about, Jules mentioned millennials, or one of you guys mentioned millennials. I wasn't really listening, to be honest. But
It was me.
Okay, we spoke collectively about millennials, and of a lot of the studies that have been done, a lot of the things that a millennial classes as value when they're working in a business isn't necessarily salary. So we've mentioned this on a previous podcast, and if you think about people being employed now that are young, that millennials, Generation Z, all of that stuff, things like lifestyle is a really, really big pull for the kind of company they want to work for. So if they're given a device that allows them to work in the way they know and the way they want to work, and they're in a business that has embraced that, then you're likely to attract the kind of people that want that, which are the best kind of people. So I kind of touched on this earlier, but it's a kind of a bigger topic really, because everybody wants the best people, but to do that, you have to attract the best people, and this is definitely one of the ways to do it, is give them the right technology.
But can I just reiterate back to what Keith was saying about sort of the IT department? I think 9 years ago, the IT department struggled with how to look after, support and manage a mobile device, an iPad, an iPhone.
Yeah.
They would look at the call for school stuff, quite sure what they're going to deliver, don't know how to do it, so we left them in a cupboard. That we've moved on such a vast distance in those 9 years, where it becomes a part of that sort of IT suite. I think we mentioned it again. We enjoy as a business making their IT directors feel sort of like they're champions again. They're leading the way instead of catching up on I'm not sure how to do that. And the second point is going back to 9 years. I think in 9 years, regards to second-hand devices. We're seeing now such a footfall of those, not stage iPad 1, iPad 2, but sort of the Air range and onwards. We're seeing that coming back, and people are not just going, I'm just going to refresh this. No, give it back. I'm actually going to refresh this. I want to go again. So the experience we're seeing is people have, on that journey, they're bought into the benefits of the business. They're bought into the ecosystem, which is Apple. Yeah. But more importantly, their whole company is moving in a way that they now can't do without.
Yeah, and I think there's another concept that we're talking about here also is who's in charge of this stuff. There used to be one person who's in charge of all the phones. There used to be one person who's in charge of all the desktops.
I know where you're going with this.
I'm going with this. This is the old one. But there used to be that this horizontal management by device type thing. And I think that has changed radically. And Apple have driven that by creating an ecosystem that everything kind of falls in line with.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense to think of all my Apple products. And this is how I deal with it, because if you think of it in lateral lines and then you're trying to think of different technologies to apply to it, you're going to fall into the trap of having to do one thing for one and a different thing for somebody else. It makes sense if you've got that whole way of working.
So that is a wonderful segue into the next thing I have in the notes that we should probably talk about.
Why don't we treat it as a wonderful segue then?
Should we? Yeah, so I'll undo that. We'll pretend we've edited that and we'll go, so how do you manage devices in an establishment, in a business?
No idea. How do we do that?
Well, you can leave then. Bye.
I think you're right. The wonderful segue is great, because I think that if you treat each of, we think of three ecosystems, Apple is the one that we'll focus on. Mm-hmm. Everything can be managed in the same way. We use Jamf as a preference for an MDM tool, mainly because it reaches quite deep into each of those technology areas. It reaches deep into what it can deliver for a mobile device like an iPad and an iPhone, but also very deep in what it can do for the Mac.
Yeah, so you were talking about the ecosystem and managing via ecosystem rather than by product type, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about is Apple Business Manager, and that's because it is kind of the piece that sits between the device and mobile device management. So we'll go into mobile device management and what that is fully in a little bit. But mainly, using Apple Business Manager allows you to control things like Apple IDs. So when we were talking before this, we were talking about, in a business, people might already have an Apple ID that they use personally. And then the question is, do I use my personal Apple ID? Am I going to be given one? How's this going to work? How am I going to get apps if I've paid for apps? How is all that stuff going to fit together? So using Apple Business Manager allows us to effectively have a managed set of Apple IDs that work across all Apple devices, regardless of which they actually are. And you can even integrate that with Azure Active Directory now. So they're kind of, they automate the creation process of these IDs and do things like password sync, which kind of undoes one of the situations you had to deal with before putting Apple devices in business by saying, right, here's a tool, here's a solution for it. Which leads us things into like, apps and books, which... Were we going to start a tally of how many times you say the old terminology?
So I call it VPP and DEP.
Yeah. So this used to be called the Volume Purchase Program. So do you want to give us a bit of an insight as to what that is, Keith?
Yeah. And I think also, just to come on the back of what you're saying, I think that I don't think that somebody who starts with a company thinks to themselves, shall I use my Apple ID? They will just use their Apple ID to do a thing.
Yeah, that's
Getting
true.
back to my earlier point of people just do what they know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be the organisational business behind it that says, hey, we've prepared an Apple ID for you. This is when you want stuff. And here's the tally we do of how many times I say stuff.
And things.
Stuff and things.
Yeah.
When you want stuff, this is where you go to get the stuff you need. And this is how you do the stuff that you're doing.
That's 5.
That's pretty good, right? But it's entirely that. And VPP or apps and books, it is now.
That's 2.
Corrected there. Is great because a organisation can pay for their apps or their ebooks or whatever it is that they want to use for a group of people and just give tokens, if you like, to people to say, you can have this, you can have this, you can have this.
You can
and they got
track
complete
how
control.
many you've got. You can, look at whether you need to buy any more, depletion, all of that kind of stuff. That's really useful.
But what's the
James,
alternative?
Sorry. I was just going to jump back
I
to James,
apologise.
actually.
Go on.
As a technical director, so you go back a number of years when our early days as a business.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a fear around managing our Apple estate at that time, or were they sort of fairly isolated in what we were doing as a wider group at the time? I know we've moved on a lot over the recent years.
So when, if you use us as an example, then we had what a lot of businesses have, which is effectively a clandestine Mac environment where you just kind of have them dotted around and they're not really managed. They're okay, a couple of people want a Mac, so let them have a Mac and we won't worry about it. It's only a couple of people. But then what happens with the prevalence of this technology in businesses is people go, that's really cool, I'd like one of those. And then suddenly you've got more Macs, and then you have more and more and more as it grows. And before you know it, that little clandestine pocket of 2, 3, 4, 5 people is now 20, 30, 40 people. Which is a real problem when you're trying to conform to things like the GDPR, if you're trying to get things like a Cyber Essentials certification, anything that involves actually being able to manage devices. And we went through that process ourselves. It reached a point where we were thinking, right, we actually need to do something about this. And that was when this technology was just kind of coming to fruition. So we learned from the start, basically. We learned by doing it ourselves, having the same problem that pretty much every business has when they don't manage things. I did a things then as well.
Good.
Stuff
Okay.
and
The
things. Yeah. And we solved it with things like Apple Business Manager, mobile device management, which is why that's what we preach. We're not just saying it because, it's a strap line or it's a thing we should talk about. It's because we've done it ourselves and it solves a situation.
But then it goes back to the maturity of the Apple piece in business, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when you talk to customers about those things, it's not being sort of landed upon people who are going, sorry, what are you talking about?
It's
They
not a shock.
understand that's going to come as part of the conversation because it's no longer a small group within a large organisation. We're seeing lots of corporates, lots of SMEs going to the route where they're going to roll out a Mac platform across hundreds of people.
Yeah. And there's also, we're talking about who's using the Macs. If you talk about Macs, it's going to be people who are influential or crucial within a business function. Equally now with iPads.
Hang on, are you saying people who don't use Macs in a business are not important?
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Evening, Mike.
I think that has changed a lot over the last 9 years.
Holy crap,
Again,
Tom's
it's-
speaking.
Yeah, I
Yay!
know. Hi guys.
Welcome to the
but yeah, I
podcast.
think if you go back to we said sort of 10 years, Macs would predominantly just be used in marketing maybe, it would be that bit where again,
creative stuff,
but sort of IT managers would just say, right, we'll give those guys over there,
marketing can do their own
drives
thing.
or whatever it might be, and we'll just keep them very separate. I think that's where things have changed so much of late in terms of bringing those, and now, like we say, you've gone from iPhone, how many people within businesses have got those, and it just is segue into the next thing, which is the Mac platform.
And that's why, Apple have evidently looked at what the issue is, and they've solved the issue with things like device enrollment, which is previously DEP or device enrollment program. We're not going to go into too much detail because we've actually done a whole separate podcast that basically covers. I know how much you love talking about it.
Yeah, well, never mind.
So we're not going to linger on that too long, but basically this completes the cycle of, you've got all these people that have Macs and they're growing and growing and growing, and then when you want to deploy Macs en masse, that's a really weird thing to try and say, Macs en masse.
Lots of Macs.
Lots of Macs and stuff and things. You can do it in an easy way. It's like a straight out of the box process. The user can provision their device themselves, etc. But it kind of fills that gap amongst managing devices and purchasing apps and books and all the other stuff you need. But actually being able to provision them automatically and easily is a really, really cool thing. So one of the things we wanted to mention is just sort of make a point about what mobile device management actually is, because there might be people watching or listening that don't know. We've said MDM a couple of times. So have you got a quick one-liner?
It's basically stuff that enables you to do the stuff and things you need to do on your stuff.
Of course.
It's a framework, right? MDM is a framework that works across lots of different devices, and it covers the things like remote locking your device, wiping your device, the kind of things that consumers will be familiar with, Find My Phone, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there is more to it behind the scenes, but the basic MDM framework covers those elements or those features.
Yeah.
But for me, I think we are beyond MDM now. I think we're talking about back to ecosystems.
Yeah.
Ecosystem-based solutions. Mm-hmm. So we're not just finding a device that's lost. We're doing something proactive with it, and we can talk about that a little bit later on.
What about pushing out sort of applications and policies and things like that? So that's the thing, going back to our early days, I presume was probably some of the pressure points for yourself, is how do you enforce the policies we put across the rest of the family here, but not being able to do the same to the Mac users?
Yeah, it was one of those things that we just kind of had a load of separate Apple IDs with credit cards attached to them, and you'd kind of ad hoc purchase. Tom probably remembers this because you've been here longer than I have, I think, as well, actually. And we were going...
Tom, you look very young.
Yeah, we were kind of wandering around going, right, whose credit card are we buying this app on and everything? And that was an absolute nightmare. But now we have a self-service app catalog. We've got controlled and measured app deployments based on which particular role someone does, or contextually even to a specific person, because one of the things we haven't got on the list to talk about, was worth a mention, is accessibility. Mm-hmm. So Apple have done a really, really good job of putting tons of accessibility features in to all of their products. And MDM kind of allows you to target a specific device owned by a specific user and say, this person has accessibility requirements, so deploy those automatically to that person. Mm. And that's kind of a bit of a game changer, because you wouldn't have been able to do that a few years ago. And
then flip that around, as sort of an IT team making a decision what devices they're going to purchase, if they have those needs, in regards to not just the great things the Mac environment does. Those for me are literally are sort of a game changer, aren't they? Because you go and buy those products and services elsewhere, they're going to be a huge cost to your business. Yes, there's a reason for doing that, but in this way, and that's one thing I really think I'm really impressed with what Apple have done over the recent years, the last 18 months, really, isn't it, around that? Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to touch on, I'm just conscious of time because we could talk about this for literally hours, as we do every day anyway, is from a strategy point of view, Keith. I know you have these conversations with people quite a lot. There's quite a few classic ones over the last few weeks where someone will say, right, we've got all these iPhones, what do we do with them now? We don't manage them, or we've got these Macs, or we've got this. Obviously, we've just talked about the solution and the fact that MDM is a thing and Apple Business Manager is a thing. Mm. But there always needs to be a strategy around it, right?
And there very rarely is. Simple as that. It's when I have conversations, it appears sometimes it is rocket science when you speak to somebody who works in an IT environment and you say, so what needs to happen for the people that use the devices, what
Yeah.
makes them successful, which is where we come from.
Yeah.
And where Steve Jobs originally said, start with the user. What are they trying to achieve? And when I'm talking to IT people, I'm saying to them that, what do your guys need to do with their devices? And interestingly, I see there is almost two camps. There is a help desk mindset, and then there's an infrastructure mindset.
Yeah.
Infrastructure want everything controlled because that's where they're coming from. It's infrastructure. We want that structure controlled.
Yeah.
Help desk are like, I want the fewest calls possible and everybody being able to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And those can almost be against each other. The great thing is that with the tools we have, is we can have that conversation with someone who's going to use the device and say, what do you need to do?
Yeah, what do you actually
Monday,
want to
Tuesday,
achieve?
Wednesday,
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday,
Yeah.
with the IT people for which they'll be taking copious notes and thinking. And the net result is if we do that, at the end of it, the IT people are going to be really happy because there's less people ringing up with problems. I can't do this thing I wanted to do. Well, you're not supposed to do that, but I need to do it. Circular conversation keeps on going round.
No, that's interesting because it's a lot of the time when someone's considering something like device management or an ecosystem change or something like that, it's easy to miss the whole what are we actually trying to achieve conversation, which is a really, really important thing for anybody that's sort of listening or watching. If you're considering putting this technology and really, really nail your strategy first, and then you'll have a much, much easier life.
That's where our teams can help. We've got sort of 4 individuals around here today talking, but reality is we've got a wider team and breadth of knowledge that actually can guide and steer a business down that road.
Yeah.
2 reasons we do it already, and secondly, we've done it for ourselves. So we've got experience in 2 camps and can share that knowledge.
As well as a multitude of customers with tons of different environments and
absolutely.
needs and
I think
wants and all that
that's
stuff.
a thing from us. It is easy to do, but it's still feared the unknown to the people who haven't done it before. Although most of those people have used the technology in a personal way, they've never delivered that in a business way. So we've got two rows, haven't we? We've got the end user, and they want to be more productive. They want to have the user choose a device, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got the IT team who need to manage that, and we can help those in both camps. And I think that's I think we're able to do that because of the products more than us as an individual team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So on the basis, there's a couple of other bits to talk about. Again, this is something I love talking about this stuff, and I think it's such a valuable topic. One of the things that always comes up is, okay, right, so now we've had the strategy conversation as a business. We've made an ecosystem decision, and we've decided we want to put Apple devices in. We know what Apple Business Manager is. We have a plan for mobile device management. Now, how do we pay for it all? That's where the device as a service piece comes in, right?
Device as a service has been muted around for so many years now, and I think everyone's got an opinion what device as a service is.
It's everything as a service now.
That's right, yeah. And you just don't pay capital for it, pay over an operating budget. So we are very sort of grown up here in the way we approach and deliver a device to service. Yes, from our academic background, we've been doing it previously in different skies, but now we're bringing more and more of our own services into the fold, how we can wrap that in. So how easy can it be to talk to a customer about you can have that Mac for X pounds per day, per hour, per user?
What's the strap line you've got for that? Is it something about a cup of coffee, right?
I can't mention that about coffee. Yeah, but yeah, it's a for a coffee a day. So if your employees are not worthy of a coffee a day, you need to sort of probably a week. Sorry, not a day, a week.
That's a week. Okay.
Yeah, so
It's even better.
Yeah, it's even better. Yeah. Month is even better if we go with that route. Yeah. So we can play on the numbers, but reality is wrapping that up into an understandable package. The reason why we can do it, and Tom can speak about this in a minute, about sort of the residual value at the end of life of a device.
Yeah.
How we take the operating cost, the capital cost of the device, you wrap in some services, including MDM with Jamf, also other elements we do as our management.
Yeah, pretty much everything that completes the
correct,
system,
yeah.
right?
And then you take the RV position in a period of time, say in 3 years' time, deduct some of that from the front number, divide it up by X number of months, weeks, whatever you're going to budget for. Your acquisition of that device is going to be a lot cheaper than capital deployed, because we're building the RV into that conversation.
Can I quickly raise
You're raising your hand.
Yeah.
I'm raising my hand here.
Yeah, live on radio.
That's twice or 3 times you said RV.
Yeah, residual value.
Residual value,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's important for Apple products, right?
Yeah, no, it's, if I'm honest, it's Apple to all products, but it's a benefit to all products. But reality is, Apple has the highest residual value of any IT product on the marketplace.
Yeah.
And Tom can explain that a little bit further why. So I don't want to sort of complicate what I'm trying to do, which is already complicated. So
Loads of financing numbers.
So if you're talking about a strategy of a business, one, a change is a cost. So how do you mitigate some of that? We build in a model with device as a service where we can mitigate some of those costs over a monthly, quarterly, annual payment. But secondly, when you actually rack up or rack down regards to that, so we can build in some bridges in there. So 10% up, 10% down, you don't pay any more, Mr. Customer, but you get new devices added to your portfolio, and then you claw back that cost at the end of agreement, etc., etc. Or more importantly, if I'm going to employ 10 new people, how much is it going to cost me from IT? Yeah. And that's probably one thing a lot of businesses still struggle to today, is understanding what is the cost of IT to us as an individual.
Yeah, so effectively what you're doing then is taking the cost of a device, lopping off that residual value bit at the end, which we will come to you talking about that, Tom, I promise.
Good, definitely. I'm really looking forward to that.
There's a reason for him being.
And then you're effectively splitting the rest of that out across a number of months. So you have a nice, easy calculation that you can do that says, each employee I have costs me this much in IT per month. You add things on like national insurance and the other kind of stuff that you have to pay for as a business. Like salary is obviously a thing. So it makes your forecasting or your cost forecasting as a business really, really easy compared to how it is now, when it's all tied up in capital purchases, and then you're looking at what your life cycle is in the machines and when you're going to have another capital purchase, etc., etc. It wraps it all up in one neat package. The same way lots of companies are doing subscription services for everything now. So it's basically
But
that,
also think about is that as a new employee, what's the most negative thing? You rack up on your first day and you get a 2-year-old laptop given to you, and it's still got login details from someone else. It's on your desk with no lead and it's not a great experience. If you're still giving someone out of the box net new, but reality is those older devices that someone's left a device behind, they don't get lost in the program. We can then remarket those data arrays, and Thomas speak about that, and all those compliant things. And so we just make our customers very safe.
Yeah.
So we can give them a service, all wrap around service around the device. We talk a lot about the devices and how good they are and the impact on the business, the user chooser models and you work anywhere benefits. But reality is, as Atama, we have the skill set around this table and the wider business to deliver the solutions to make this a viable proposition.
Yeah, and I think also we talked a lot there about the financial side of that from device as a service, but also wrapping in those other services with it as well. It takes away that concern, or it just gives that sort of peace of mind that you great, we've got the device, but you're also wrapping into that the mobile device management. So it's it's not just the financial benefit. You're also then going, right, I can really trust and ensure that going down this route, I've got everything as part of it, and it's just one. The financial bit is the bolt onto the top of it.
So while we've got you talking and you're on a roll now, right? So we've gone through the process in terms of what a business's process would go through if they're adopting Apple technology into their estate. So we've made a decision about, we want great employees, we want to keep the best employees, we want to give people choice. So we've made an ecosystem decision. We've now made a decision on how we're going to manage everything. So we're going to make sure that we wrap everything up in a nice, secure, tight, GDPR, Cyber Essentials compliant way to deploy apps, settings, all of that kind of stuff. We figured out how we're going to finance it. What happens at the end of the life of that device? Like, do you want to talk us through the process of, this device is now 3 years old, for example? What do you do?
Yeah, very, very good question. So yeah, I guess device at kind of 3 years old, typically you're out of warranty. There's potentially the issue to start, things are slowing down. There might be some more support costs and everything that goes with it. So really 3 years is looking at from a sort of optimal refresh. So what we
just to clarify, is that what you'd suggest? Is it 3 years? Can you sweat them a bit more?
Yeah, you can. I think 3 years is really looking at that optimal point. I guess it's I guess like other items, a substantial drop off in its value. Like a car, you drive out the showroom, it's fairly similar in technology. But that 3 year point is a kind of sweet spot because it's still able to use the latest operating system. It's still got all the benefits there. After that period, you start to look at support and it's how long it's been used, battery life, things like that, where there's some additional cost to it. So 3 years is optimal. What we then look to do as part of that is go, okay, well, what value can we realise from that device? So it's firstly making sure that device is completely clear of any customer data, and having very strict processes in place from right the way through to getting that device collected. Us taking responsibility for the data that's on that.
You have like trackers and stuff in the van.
Absolutely, yeah. So
that amazed me when I heard about that. So literally, it leaves a customer's site, and that customer knows where that product is. Absolutely, yeah. Any time.
So we as soon as we arrive at that customer site, we're effectively taking responsibility for that device. They're signing over ownership to ourselves. We're taking satellite tracked vehicles. We're taking security cleared staff, and it's we're not stopping at other places on the way. It's door to door, even to the point we've got 2 guys in the vehicle to make sure that if we do need to stop, at any point while the vehicle breaks down, that there's always someone with it. It then comes back and goes through a full sort of data erasure process. So that's accredited. We typically utilise Blanco, which is approved.
So it gives you the WE Directive data destruction certificate at the end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of that, you've got a certified data erasure, so that it's almost your sort of guarantee that there's no way that there's any data left on this device. It's almost an insurance policy in many ways. It's insured for, I think it's $10 million, and never ever has anyone had to call off against it.
Yeah,
it's so you've never been able to forensically. If it's forensically irretrievable, the data is destroying it. And then what we then look to do is obviously where can we realise that the best value from that device? It's ultimately remarketing it, providing a second use. So that's predominantly in sort of UK, the markets and different areas, but there is still. Its ecosystem is attractive, and there's always people that are wanting to sort of go down that route, and even
people do aspire to own Apple, don't they? So
they do,
even
absolutely.
in the used market.
It's then that value can then be utilised and brought back into the business. So if we're talking about then swapping over the device and you get a brand new shiny one, rather than that having to pay the full value of that brand new device, you're only paying the difference between what you've been able to realise from its resale and the price. So you're paying less than.
So take what Tom just said there. Imagine that onto a device as service model. Yeah. You're not paying the full recommended retail price or the cost of the device. You're paying a reduced amount because we've offset previous technology.
Because we know there's going to be residual value.
That's correct. And then brings that cost down. So the conversation you now have with a client is so different, isn't it? Is where potentially we're going to buy a lot more assets. We actually can guide them down the road and saying, you know what, you get good value for this because we do that. But actually, what about investing in mobile technology, in iPad as well, and seeing how you can utilise that in your working environment? So we can help people down that journey by just utilising the great service we've got in house.
So effectively, we make the whole thing just one nice process from start to finish when it comes to making the decision, buying the device, hooking it all up, making sure it works, taking it back at the end, doing the data destruction stuff, making that an official process that is ratified that you get certification for, and then taking that fund and then putting it back into going again with new devices, and so the cycle continues.
Yeah, and we can also do that up front. So if people want to take that, typically there's going to be devices within an organisation. If they're going to look to move to this device as a service offering, collectively probably within that business there's going to be existing devices. So we can look to understand what they are, and then whatever we can realise value from that, build that again into the device as a service.
We understand the assets and give that value back to the organisation, and then that rolls back into the team I work within, and then with Keith, and how we approach that back to our clients. It's such a strong proposition, and that rolled up with device as a service and mobile device management as a. There you go. You're paying this ongoing. Per pound, per week, per month, whatever it may be. Makes the decision process a lot easier for people to move into Apple.
And just managing that as well just takes up such less, having to worry about when different agreements expire. And
what do I do here?
It just simplifies things so much.
It comes to a similar kind of thing. When I speak to these customers, nobody wants responsibility for that, really. No, that's the last thing anybody wants to look at. They've got something else more important they want to do. So coming to a partner or a customer with a life cycle process is music to most people's ears. It's like, don't need to worry about that then. They're great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. On that note, I think we've now expired in terms of time.
I hope not.
I feel like I'm still alive.
There we have. We'll do some more of these. We've got another one of these coming up in the next few months as well, so we'll go into a lot of this in a bit more detail. But ultimately, that is that for that episode.
Thanks, James.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for listening. Thank you for watching and breaking the fourth wall at the end there. Yeah, you're gonna. Oh, in fact, actually, we've got on a time of water bottle. Hold on a sec. Matt, you getting this? Just there
Perfect.
we go.
On brand all round.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So if you'd like any more information about any of the topics that we've covered today, either get in touch with your account manager or go to atama.tech, which is atama.tech, and click the contact button in the top right-hand corner of the page. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.
Cheers.